All right, today we are diving deep into one of the most incredible legal systems ever created, the Talmud. We're going to see how it works by looking at just one super intense debate between some of the greatest minds of the ancient world. So imagine this. You've got a foundational text, kind of like a constitution, but it was written thousands of years ago. It's got all these big core principles, but it doesn't cover every little thing you run into today. So how do you build a living, breathing legal system on top of that without just, making stuff up? Well, the Talmud is a massive, multi-generational answer to that very question. Before we get into the main event, let's do a quick warm-up. This first case is a bit simpler, but it's going to introduce us to one of the most important tools the rabbis use to solve these kinds of legal puzzles. Okay, so here's the problem. The Torah, the main text, says a firstborn animal has to be brought as an offering. Great. But it leaves out a really important detail. Where exactly on this huge altar does the priest put the blood? The text is completely silent on this. So what do? The sages have this really powerful tool they use called a verbal analogy. And the idea is actually pretty cool. If the same specific word pops up in two totally different laws, the sages see that as a kind of textual hyperlink. It's a clue that these two laws are connected, and that a detail from one can help you understand the other. Let's just walk through the logic here. The law for our mystery offering, the firstborn, uses the Hebrew word for sprinkling. Now, it turns out that exact same word appears in the law for a totally different sacrifice, the burnt offering. And here's the key. For the burnt offering, the text is explicit. It says the blood goes to the base of the altar. So, by linking those two laws through that one shared word, you can fill in the blank. The missing detail is supplied. Problem solved. All right, warm-up's over. Now for the main event. Picture this. We're at the famous rabbinic academy, the vineyard at Yavne, which was basically the intellectual center of the Jewish world. And the sages there are about to lock horns over a much tougher question. And this is the question that sets everything off. It seems so simple, right? Can you eat the leftovers the next day or not? But the answer is going to force these brilliant scholars to defend the very foundations of how they think. First up is Rabbi Tarfon, a senior scholar. He says you can eat it for 2 days and a night. And his reasoning? He draws an analogy to peace offerings because they're both in the same general category of holiness. But then, a newcomer, Rabbi Yossi the Galilean, stands up and challenges him. No, he says, it's only 1 day and 1 night because it's more like a sin offering. They're both required gifts to the priest. So right away, we have 2 different analogies leading to 2 totally different answers. And the debate just explodes from there. Rabbi Tarfon defends his turf, saying, look, my analogy is better because neither a firstborn nor a peace offering is about atoning for a sin. But Rabbi Yossi fires right back. He says, no way, my analogy is stronger because both firstborns and sin offerings are obligatory. You have to bring them, unlike peace offerings, which are often voluntary. They're literally dueling over which comparison is the most logical, the most airtight. It really feels like they're stuck. Both arguments kind of make sense. They're at an impasse. But just then, another figure gets up to speak. And it's the legend himself, Rabbi Akiva. He's about to completely change the game. He basically says, you're both looking at this the wrong way. We shouldn't be debating these broad, abstract categories. We need to look at the specific words of the text. So Rabbi Akiva quotes this verse from the book of Numbers. He says, this right here, this is the smoking gun. The Torah itself, he argues, explicitly compares the meat of the firstborn offering to the breast and thigh that are given to the priest from a different kind of offering. And Akiva's point seems like a slam dunk. Everyone knew that those parts, the breast and thigh, were associated with the peace offering, which, you guessed it, is eaten for 2 days. Case closed. But Rabbi Yossi is not giving up. In this absolutely brilliant counter, he points out that a thanks offering also involves giving the breast and thigh to the priest, and a thanks offering is only eaten for 1 day. The verse doesn't specify which one it's talking about, so who's to say which analogy is right? And this is where Rabbi Akiva shows why he's a legend. He actually admits Yossi's point is a good one, but then he tells everyone to look closer at a tiny detail in the verse. The text says, their flesh shall be yours, it shall be yours. Why say it twice? Akiva argues that there are no wasted words in the Torah. That extra phrase has to be there for a reason, to add an extra day of eating, proving the 2-day rule. It's just a stunning checkmate. But wait, the story is not over. Word of this debate gets to another master scholar, Rabbi Ishmael, and when he hears how Akiva won the argument, he's not impressed. He's actually alarmed.
He doesn't care who won. He cares about how they were arguing. So Rabbi Yishmael sends a message with his students, and it's this shocking, public correction of one of the greatest sages alive. Go tell Rabbi Akiva, you were mistaken. Not mistaken about the answer, but mistaken in his very reasoning. And this is the deep, profound question Rabbi Yishmael throws onto the table. He says that Rabbi Yossi's whole counter-argument about the thanks offering, it should have been thrown out from the start, and Akiva was wrong to even engage with it. Why? It all comes down to a fundamental rule of logic.
Rabbi Yishmael lays down this master principle. You cannot build a chain of analogies. In other words, if a law is already the result of a logical step, you can't then use that derived law as the starting point for a brand new analogy. You always have to go back to the original source text. A derived law is like a copy of a copy. It's just not strong enough to be a new foundation. So this table really breaks it down. For Rabbi Yishmael, the rule is strict. The law about the thanks offering is itself derived from somewhere else, so it can't be used in a new analogy. End of story. Rabbi Yossi's argument was out of bounds from the beginning. But Rabbi Akiva's view is more flexible. He seems to think that if a derived law is also backed up by other details in the text, maybe it is strong enough to be used as a source. And that's why he felt he had to beat Yossi's argument on its own terms. And this, right here, is the big reveal. The whole debate stopped being about how long you can eat leftovers and became about something way more important. What are the rules for a good argument? What makes legal reasoning valid in the first place? It's all about the integrity of the process. So let's zoom out for a second. What does this incredibly detailed ancient argument really tell us about how this whole system works, about how it understands law and even truth itself? Well, we see a few core principles bubble to the surface. First, the process of arguing, as Rabbi Yishmael showed us, is just as important as the final conclusion. Second, truth isn't just handed down. It's discovered through intense debate, like the one between Tarfon, Yossi, and Akiva. Third, every single word in the source text is treated like a clue in a mystery. Remember how Akiva focused on that repeated phrase? And the logic isn't a free-for-all. It has to follow strict, established rules. And maybe most amazing of all, the Talmud preserves even the losing arguments because it values the logical insights they offer for future generations. And that whole debate we just went through, it's just one drop in an ocean. The standard printed edition of the Talmud is over 2,700 pages long, and it's jam-packed with thousands of arguments just like this one. It's a vast sea of logic and storytelling. And that really brings us to our final question for today. In our modern world of hot takes and knee-jerk opinions, what can we learn from this ancient system? A system that places such a high value on structured argument, on textual evidence, and on a rigorous, shared process for trying to figure out what's true.